Hello, USA. I'm nobody, just an American, and this is just an American moment. It's been an interesting week because I've had a lot of people contact me in terms of topics they want me to talk about. I've had inquiries about the Durham report, and is that something should I explore? Clearly, the border crisis is making the news these days, and people want me to say more about that, although I did talk last week about that. Um, Somebody sent me a note and said, how about Russian collusion? Why don't you stir that up a little bit? And I'm giving some thoughts to that. Another big topic is the media's misrepresentation of the new Georgia voting laws. And that clearly is something we should talk about going forward. And I'll take a look at that. One of the funnier ones I got is somebody asked me to talk about Lori Loughlin and her husband Giancarlo. Lori Loughlin, that's who they wanted me to talk about. But guess what? I might actually do that because there's more to that story that we should all know about, and there are more questions that need to be asked, and I'd be happy to get into that. And then there's the "Where's Hunter?" question. We know he's got a new book out, and people said, "Why don't you talk about Hunter Biden?" But the topic I want to talk about today is really more serious in nature. If you've gotten a copy of my book, I'm Nobody, Just an American, I cover the topic of race in depth in that book. And I want to play around that topic today, um, but I also need to be cautious. My real question for the day is, why is the mainstream media fueling racism in this country? Because that's exactly what they're doing. You only have to watch the news uh, to know it. But before I go on to the topic, because I don't want to hear screams of racist at the end of this presentation or anything else, let me give you a quick perspective of where I'm coming from. Uh, Number one, I've had the luxury because of my career to live all over the world and work all over the world. I've spent time, extensive time in Africa. I spent a long majority of my career on the various countries in Asia, everywhere from Indonesia to Korea to India to Nepal, and a ton of time in mainland China. I've worked all over Europe, and this is really just a benefit of the type of career that I ended up having. So I've got to work with people of literally every race, every ethnic background, every religious preference that is out there. And literally, for the last 40 years, all the communities that I've lived in have been multiracial communities, they've been multi ethnic communities, and they've been multi religious communities. I've had some great friends, great neighbors of all races, creeds, religions, you name it. So, for those of you who are out there who are going to start yelling that I'm a racist after you hear my comments, um, you're going after the wrong guy. But I'm sure it's going to happen anyhow. The first thing that bothers me with the whole racism thing is the whole notion of white supremacy and white privilege. Every day, I turn on my news and I flip the channels, and I keep waiting to see the white supremacy crimes. But guess what? I don't hear anything. I don't hear about the white supremacy shootings. I don't hear about the white supremacy killings. I don't hear about the white supremacy takeovers of cities. I don't hear about all these white privileged people routinely taking advantage of non white people. And there's a good reason for that. Because the 99.9% of us out there are not racist. We get along with everybody. And the most important thing is we recognize one important thing. If you're in this country legally, and you're a naturalized citizen or you're born in this country, you are an American first. My neighbors, my multi ethnic neighbors, as uh, the media would like to call them, are nice people. They're friendly. We all get along. Um, these people don't have racist bones in their body. But nevertheless, we hear the outcry racism, racism, racism. And I got to tell you, it's gotten out of control. Uh, when I put myself through graduate school by working as a janitor and I had a wife and two kids at home, I didn't really feel white privilege. Uh, I earned everything I have, and I worked hard to get it. But that's my qualifier, but I have to say it. One of the things that really struck me in the news recently is you had a white guy shoot seven people, and five of those seven were Korean girls who worked in a massage parlor. And what they did for their profession, I don't care. That was their business. It's a tragedy for any American to die. And it's a tragedy for any American to die at the hands of another person, no matter what that person's race is. You know, but instead of thinking about a lunatic who committed that crime, because he did kill two people who were not Asian or Korean, um, we immediately went to gun control, and we immediately went to um, Asian hate and Asian discrimination. And I'm not certain that that's what that crime was at all. Um, but then a few days later, you have a black guy in New York who literally beats the hell out of a 65-year-old Chinese woman. And somehow they try to link that as hate pushed by white supremacists or white privileged people. How ludicrous is that? You had a guy who murdered his mother and he beats up an Asian woman. And one of the things most people don't realize, by the way, is, and the statistics are out there, you can check me on this if you want to, 85% plus of all crimes committed against Asian people are committed by non-whites. That's just an unfortunate statistic. The way, again, I look at it, it's an American hurting another American, and that's just not good. You know, but the media covers this stuff up. They don't talk about it. You'll see the story for a day or two, and then it's gone. You had an incident recently at spring break where two black guys from Greensboro, North Carolina, drugged, raped, and killed a young woman. The media didn't cover it. I mean, it got on the local news. I think it got about 5 minutes, and that was it. No one wanted to talk about it because it didn't fit a narrative. And that's absolutely, it's crazy. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And then more recently, you had the fellow Noah X, who runs into the police officers at the Capitol. Tell me, was that a hate crime? Was it a hate against the white police officers? Was it hate against our country? What was that? And yet the media was very slow to disclose that the individual committing the crime was a member of the Nation of Islam and black. Now, the truth is the truth, no matter who perpetrates the crime. And yet the media tries to cover it up. But the second you have a situation where it's white on black, everything reverses. And that's not part of what Alan Dershowitz would call the shoe on the other foot rule. But we'll see about that. But let's think even more about something more tragic. You know, in 2020, 40 children, more than 40 children actually, 40 black children were the victims of murder. Murder. Did you see Al Sharpton there? Did you see Jesse Jackson there? Was the media up in arms about the fact that all these children died in Chicago? Most of these were black on black crime, and that's a pity. I feel my heart reaches out to the black community because they have to be, unfortunately, or they are sometimes, associated with that criminal element. And that's plain wrong. But the fact is, we're ignoring what the problem is, which brings me to the whole subject of the media proliferating hate and violence and a division of the races. And obviously, these people have never read their Federalist Papers, because if they did, They know that Hamilton and Madison both spoke out strongly against uh, the creation of factions in this country. And that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing the creation of factions, and factions are sure to kill our democracy, sure to kill this country. Which leads me to the subject of George Floyd. Now, come on, folks. Who's going to be honest out there? George Floyd was a habitual criminal. George Floyd was a drug addict. George Floyd, before being apprehended by the police, had just committed a crime. Now, let me make this clear. No one in this country should ever die at the hands of police when they're in custody. Nobody. But there's one thing George Floyd wasn't, and that's a hero. Not a hero who justifies murders going up by 70% in Minneapolis this year. Not somebody who justifies riots in the street, and yet the media has fueled it and fueled it and fueled it. What about those poor kids in Chicago who were murdered? What about them? Do we remember their names? Did their families get $25 million settlements? These were innocent children. But George Floyd, his family gets $25 million in settlements before the case has even been tried. And look, what we really saw in this whole George Floyd case is this. First of all, years ago, a story like this would have never gotten into the national media. It would have been a local story, and it would have been handled on a local basis. But the national media sensationalized this story and wanted to make George Floyd a heroic figure and a victim, and they wanted to show that it exemplifies white on black crime. It doesn't. What we have here is a longtime criminal who ran into a rogue cop, and that combination resulted in the death of a criminal. And I'm sure Mr. Chauvin will be taken care of by the law, although people may not like the results. He's being tried. He should be punished because, as I said, no one should ever die in the hands of the police. So we'll see what happens. But why is the mainstream media pushing and pushing and pushing this black on white narrative? What do they want to do? They CNN televises this story all day long. They show the trial. What are they trying to encourage here? Are they looking for more violence? Does it make for a better story? I want you to all think about that. Is George Floyd the kind of guy we want to see as a heroic figure? Or are those children in Chicago who were killed? Huh? Let's think about that. I know I am. Anyhow, it's a sad note to go out on, but it's just me, and I'm nobody, just an American. It's what I think. Please remember, buy the book. It's got really good stuff in here. I think the chapter on race says it all. Thanks very much.